Welcome back to another episode of The Story Behind the Painting. Today, for episode 10, we return to the hallowed halls of the Galleria degli Uffizi in Florence. You may remember from our previous episode on Paolo Uccello's The Battle of San Romano. We discussed how that work is scattered across Europe, with only one panel remaining here in Florence. Today, however, we stand before a monumental work that arrived in this city in 1483 and never truly left. It is a work that acted as a bridge between the Northern Renaissance and the Italian masters, a painting so detailed and emotionally raw that it changed the course of Florentine art forever. This is the Portinari Altar, the magnum opus of the Flemish master Hugo van der Goes.
Welcome to Story Behind the Painting, where we dive into the most famous art works and learn a lot from that.
Let us first look at the sheer scale of this achievement. The Portinari Altar is a triptych, a three-paneled altarpiece. When fully opened, it spans a staggering 6 meters in width and 2.5 meters in height. It remains one of the largest and most imposing examples of Northern Renaissance art in existence. But the brilliance is not just in the size, it is in the medium. Unlike the Italian masters of the time who were still largely using egg tempera, Hugo van der Goes utilized the Flemish secret weapon oil paint on large oak panels. By using linseed and walnut oils, Hugo could apply paint in translucent layers or glazes. This is why the colors you see, the deep lapis lazuli of Mary's robe and the crimson of the angels, seem to glow from within. This oil technique allowed for a level of hyperrealism and optical effects that Italian fresco or tempera simply could not match. It was painted in the city of Ghent in present-day Belgium between 1475 and 1478. But how did such a massive Flemish work end up in the heart of the Italian Renaissance? It was commissioned by Tommaso Portinari, a shrewd and ambitious Italian banker. Portinari was the representative of the Medici Bank in Bruges, and he wanted a monument that would cement his legacy both in the north and back home in Florence. The painting's journey was a feat of 15th century logistics. Because of its weight and the fragility of the oak panels, it could not travel over the Alps. Instead, it was sent by sea sailing from the North Sea around the coast of Spain and into the Mediterranean. After arriving in Sicily on a merchant ship, it was carefully moved to a barge and carried up the Arno River. When it finally reached the gates of Florence on May 28, 1483, it took 16 porters to carry the heavy crates to their final destination, the high altar of the Church of San Egidio. When the crates were opened, the local Florentine artists were reportedly stunned. They had never seen anything so large, so detailed, or so vividly alive. At its heart, this is a scene of the Nativity. Do not let the title fool you into expecting a cozy, celebratory moment. Unlike airy Italian versions by Botticelli, this work presents heavy tension and stark realism. Look at the Virgin Mary. She is not the youthful, radiant mother of the Renaissance. She is somber, her hands joined in a prayer that looks more like a plea. Her robe is deepest blue, almost black, the color of mourning. In Flemish art, this is a deliberate prolepsis, a flash forward to the Passion. Even at his birth, she contemplates the eventual death of her son. Look at the infant Christ. He is not in a soft manger. He lies naked on the cold, hard earth, surrounded by a golden gloriole of light. This choice follows the visions of Saint Bridget of Sweden and emphasizes humility. It also underscores his role as the bread of life fallen to earth. Surrounding them is a celestial court of 15 angels. Their clothing are liturgical vestments, the actual capes and dalmatics of priests. This transforms the Nativity into a cosmic liturgy. Some angels wear white for purity, while others wear dark colors echoing sorrow. On the side wings, we encounter the Portinari family with staggering detail. On the left, Tommaso Portinari kneels with his sons beside towering saints. St. Thomas holds a spear, and St. Anthony Abbot shows a bell and rosary with leathery skin texture. On the right, Tommaso's wife, Maria Baroncelli, wears Burgundian fashion with a gold-embroidered collar. Her daughter, Margherita, kneels behind her guarded by St. Margaret atop a dragon. Mary Magdalene stands holding her signature ointment jar. In the distant landscape, Van der Goes has hidden prequels and sequels to the story. On the left, hills, Mary and Joseph travel to Bethlehem, with Mary struggling on the journey. On the right hills, the three magi approach their exotic silhouettes, visible against the horizon. In the center above the cave, an angel appears to the shepherds in the distance. In the foreground, those same shepherds have already arrived at the scene. The architecture is symbolic. The Christ child lies before a shattered Romanesque building. This building represents the old law crumbling to make way for the new law. The columns are made of porphyry, a stone reserved for royalty, signaling a king is present even in ruins. Finally, notice the hierarchical scale. The saints are nearly twice the size of the Portinari family. While Italians moved toward natural proportions, Van der Goes used this older scale to create psychological awe. The humans look fragile and small, tucked under the protective mountainous cloaks of their patron saints. This is where Hugo van der Goes truly shines. Let your eyes fall to the bottom of the central panel. We see two vases of flowers, which are not merely decorative and are a theological map. The scarlet lily symbolizes the blood of the Passion. The white and blue irises represent purity and the 7 sorrows of the Virgin. The scattered violets are a symbol of humility. The columbine aquilegia with dark blue petals represents melancholy and the suffering to come. Behind these flowers lies a sheaf of wheat, a direct reference to Bethlehem, which means house of bread and symbolizes the Eucharist. Observe the background. On the right, we see the shepherds. Unlike the idealized figures in Italian art, these are rugged, weathered men with calloused hands and gaps in their teeth. They represent the common people captured with a disastrous realism that shocked 15th century viewers. The textures are breathless. The cold, gray, rocky outcrops, the translucent wings of the angels, and the heavy gold-embroidered brocades of the saints' robes. Every inch of these 6 meters is packed with meaning and minute detail. Who was the soul behind this intensity? To understand the Portinari Altar, we must look into the complex inner world of its creator. Hugo van der Goes was far more than a painter. He was a titan of his era. By 1467, he rose to become the dean of the Ghent Guild of St. Luke. He was a luminary of the glittering Burgundian court, even managing the lavish decorations for the wedding of Charles the Bold and Margaret of York. Yet, at the very height of his fame, he made a choice that stunned the art world. In 1477, shortly after completing this masterpiece, Hugo walked away from his worldly success to enter the Red Cloister Monastery near Brussels. But Hugo's life behind the cloister walls was unique. Due to his immense reputation, he remained a lay brother, granted the rare privilege of continuing his craft. He famously entertained high-ranking visitors who traveled vast distances just to witness the great Hugo at work. However, this life of prestige was shadowed by a heavy burden. Hugo struggled with an overwhelming spiritual desolation, often called melancholy by his peers. We see the echoes of this struggle within the Portinari Altar. Look again at the shepherds. There is a frantic, almost breathless energy in their faces that was entirely new to the history of art. It creates a striking tension between the divine peace of the Nativity and a profound human restlessness. The chronicles of his fellow monk Gaspar of Huys provide a moving account of Hugo's later years. Around 1481, Hugo experienced a profound spiritual crisis. He became deeply convinced of his own unworthiness, overwhelmed by the weight of his perceived failings. Aufhuys's diary offers one of the first psychological portraits in art history. He suggests Hugo's struggle was fueled by pressure to perfect the Portinari Altar and demands of his high-profile life. There was also a deep conflict between his artistic pride and his humble faith. In many ways, Hugo van der Goes was a precursor to the modern artist. Long before Van Gogh, he was the original troubled genius, a man whose creative fire was deeply linked to his emotional depth. Though he passed away in 1482, his legacy remains one of atmospheric gloom. In the Portinari Altar, we are not just observing a sacred event. We are witnessing the very soul of an artist who poured the weight of the human experience into every brushstroke. The Portinari Altar did more than fulfill a banker's contract. When it arrived in Florence, it was a lightning bolt for local artists. Ghirlandaio and Leonardo da Vinci studied its realism and its use of oil paint, forever changing the Italian approach to texture and light. It is a painting of contradictions, a celebration of birth that whispers of death. It is a display of immense wealth commissioned by a banker, centered on a child lying on the cold, hard earth. Thank you for joining us for episode 10 of The Story Behind the Painting. If you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to check out our other episodes here at MUZEA, where we deconstruct the world's most iconic masterpieces. Download the MUZEA app today. It is your ultimate companion for art lovers. With our app, you can rate and review museums and art galleries globally, take virtual tours of both permanent collections and temporary exhibitions, deepen your knowledge with exclusive curator-led content, explore art with us. We will see you in the next episode.
Welcome to Story Behind the Painting, where we dive into the most famous art works and learn a lot from that.